I think we will get started. So welcome everybody. Welcome to our webinar today, Measuring Women's Economic Empowerment, Testing a Set of Common Indicators. First, just a couple housekeeping notes. Only the panelists and organizers can unmute and be on video today, but feel free to ask questions in the chat for speakers at any time, and we'll be monitoring that. If anyone has any technical difficulties, please reach out to my colleague, Danny Fernandez. And lastly, this session is being recorded. And after the event, this presentation will be posted on our event page, so it'll be available for everyone. Okay, so let's move on. Just to say here that in case you're, first of all, my name is Jenny Morgan. I'm a facilitator for FinEquity, and I lead the work stream on measuring women's economic empowerment. For those of you who are new to FinEquity, it's a global community of over 9,000 researchers, practitioners, policymakers, donors working on women's financial inclusion, and it's convened by CGAP. So you can find more about the community and how to join, sign up for newsletters, etc. in the chat. And then I want to just kind of move to the agenda. So we have a lot of great speakers, a lot of great content. Is the screen shared? Okay, we'll be screen sharing in 1 second. Here we go. Cheeto, you can go ahead and move to the agenda slide. Great. Okay. So I want to go over the agenda for the next hour or so. Today, we're going to share a set of common indicators to measure women's economic empowerment due to increased financial inclusion. We'll give you some background on the process for developing these indicators and how we tested and refined these through a collab learning initiative. We'll have a discussion with 2 of these collab partners about their experience testing, what they learned, the value of measuring that they anticipate for their organizations. And then we have some time for audience Q&A and to hear from one of our advisory group members, Antony Koning, as well. Just wanted to thank all of the collab partners and CGAP and for funding this initiative, and IPA for working with us on it as a technical advisor. And you'll get to hear more from everyone shortly. But before we do that, we want to go into a quick pulse check here with the audience. So a poll should be popping up on your screen in just a minute. Take a minute, answer this question. Does your organization or organizations that you support or work with currently measure women's economic empowerment as a result of increased financial inclusion? And there's no wrong answer. Okay, I think we can close this. So great. Now, there's still, for some of us, starting point, what is women's economic empowerment? It's fine. There's a lot in the, we'd like to start, not yet, but we want to start. And then really the majority are in, we're measuring some aspects of but you want to measure more, be more comprehensive. So that's a great place to start. So thank you. Now, just to move to the next slide here, Cheeto, I want to introduce our speakers. So we have our 2 collab panelists here, Benedette Menke from People's Pension Trust in Ghana, Edwin Masareka from Village Enterprise, and our advisory group member, Antony Koning from CGAP. And then my co-moderator today will be Joanna Ledgerwood. And you can read more about us on the event page. And that'll be the same one where you registered. We'll link that as well. But moving to the next slide here. Great. So just to give you a little bit background on how we got here. So the problem we were trying to solve was that there was a lack of harmonized definitions and common indicators for, and that made it difficult to understand which financial inclusion interventions and investments were most beneficial for outcomes. So back in 2022, FinEquity with CGAP, Center for Global Development and Data 2X, alongside an advisory group of leading organizations, developed a shared framework for measuring we within financial inclusion. And at that point, we developed a theory of change for how this would happen and a draft set of indicators that we then, this past year, tested through this collaborative learning process. And there were 7 collab partners as a part of this, and they helped us to refine the measurement framework and the indicators. And we had IPA on as this technical advisor to guide us in this process. And then coming soon, within in the next few months or so, we'll have a brief that CGAPs will publish, and that will share the indicators for measuring we that we're presenting today, the accompanying questionnaire to be able to survey customers with this, and then an enumerator guide and a code book and guidance on how to calculate the indicators. All of that will be packaged together with the brief. Okay, next slide. And next slide. Thanks. Okay, so this was our starting point for identifying the key dimensions of we and women's financial inclusion and the initial set of indicators that we refined in the collab. I won't go into a lot of detail about this theory of change. You can find more about it and how we developed it in the background paper that will be linked in the chat. But I just want to highlight a few things. So the theory of change and the indicators and the questionnaire, et cetera, are intended to be intervention agnostic. So on the left-hand side of this, you'll see an illustrative but not an exhaustive list of interventions. The indicators we're presenting today fit into the columns of resources, direct outcomes, agency, the intermediate outcomes, and achievements, which are the final long-term or impact outcomes. And while access to and usage of financial services are integral, they're not included in the set of we indicators we're presented today, based on the assumption that these are already being measured in some way. And furthermore, what we're looking at really is to measure the top level, which in this theory of change is on the right-hand side. But what is the women's economic empowerment that's resulting from increased women's financial inclusion? Okay, so we can move to the next slide. Thanks. And this is just to give a brief overview of the process we went through with the collab. We refined these indicators and we developed this accompanying questionnaire, enumerator, guide, codebook to be able to administer and test. Then the partners designed their pilots, their measurement plans, determined their sample sizes, customize the questionnaire for their intervention, their organization, and then we had the data collection, the cleaning, and the analysis. So training the enumerators, collecting the data, cleaning the data. And lastly, we're in this final phase of documenting this and disseminating the learning. So the partners gave a lot of feedback to us on the questionnaire, on the enumerator guide, and we're currently updating that to reflect the testing, and we'll be putting that out to the community. All right. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the indicators. So we have them separated into the three columns, the 3 buckets I mentioned before. So this first one is looking at the resources. So these are the material, human, social, resources, attributes that women have, including education and skills, along with the enabling environment piece. So we have 4 indicators. Here, we have attitudes about paid work, economic participation, equity in household labor, and competence using financial products. So I just read out the dimensions and you'll see the indicators right next to them on the right. Pause and then we can, thank you. And then here we have the intermediate outcomes, the agency and competence indicators. And so in the context of women's economic empowerment, this is about having the skills and resources to compete in markets, fair and equal access to economic institutions, power to make and act on decisions, and have control over resources. So we're looking at financial autonomy, household financial decision-making, mobility, time use, privacy, self-confidence in managing finances, goal setting, subjective control over finances, and satisfaction with financial situation. And I'll just pause here for a minute. You can read the accompanying indicator. Just move to the last slide, please, Cheeto. And these are the ones within the achievements, the final outcomes, the impact. And we're looking at financial health, community respect, assets, and income. Now, I know that was a pretty quick presentation. We can, we'll be sharing this presentation as well, but just wanted to reflecting on these 17 dimensions. What would you, if you were to prioritize a shorter list, would you have a, top number? I'm not going to name a number, but thinking about what's important for your interventions and what measurements of women's economic empowerment you think you could impact with your financial intervention. Just take a moment here, and you can choose as many as you'd like, but maybe not all of them if we're trying to prioritize. And the poll, you'll need to scroll down to see all of the options, the little gray bar on the right-hand side here. Great. As you're doing this as well, if there are any clarifying questions that I can answer quickly or we can answer in the chat, I'll move over to there in just a minute and take a look, but please add those questions so we can try and clarify anything right now. All right. I think we're, pretty good participation levels. I'm just taking a look here. Economic participation is coming in quite high. And that's, percentage of women participating in income generating activities. Let's see what else here. Financial autonomy and household financial decision making also coming in quite high. Yeah, and that one is around percentage of women being able to make financial decisions independently, and also the level of participation in the household financial decisions. Great. And yeah, I think income also quite high, and self-confidence in managing finances. So the level of confidence in managing one's own finances. And then income, percentage of women who've seen a change and increase in the levels of individual or household income as a result of this participation in this intervention. So it's great. Okay, I think we could close the poll. Thank you all for participating. And I'm just going to quickly look over here in the chat to see if there were some urgent questions that came in. A list of the participating organizations, sure, for the collab partners, we can put that in there. Did the partners measure and calculate these indicators themselves? Thanks for your question, Mary. They did. We'll get to that in the panel in just a minute. You'll hear from the collab partners. Sorry, I'm going a little bit backwards here, scrolling up. The age of the women considered, I believe that's in the survey. So there was quite a range, Joan. There were over 1,000 women surveyed. Each organization had a different sample size, but I don't have the age off the top of my head, but I think Edwin and Benedette can at least speak to the profile of who they surveyed within their organizations. Oh, thanks. Elliot's popping in from IPA to help answer some of these questions as well. Montessier, I mentioned the presentation will be shared after the event. And do you give support to our women in Africa, especially Sierra Leone? So this project isn't direct support to women. It's about supporting measurement framework for how to understand whether women are more economically empowered due to an increase in receiving or being part of a financial intervention. Let's see, Chloe from World Food Program started to measure women's financial inclusion metrics 3 to 4 years ago, now more systematically track the number of women who receive humanitarian or government cash. So the moment we measure more access, but need to do more measuring on usage and financial health, as well as the link between financial access and food security. So yes, that's great. So as we mentioned, access and usage are the starting point, but this tries to look at what are then, what's happening because of the access and usage. So you're welcome to use these resources we'll be putting out. Okay, I think I've mostly caught up here, but I will keep monitoring the chat, and colleagues Elliot from IPA and Isabella are here today, so they'll also take a look if they can answer questions, but keep them coming in, and we will have some more time after the panel to answer some more questions from the audience. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joanna, who will be moderating our next section here. Over to you, Joanna.
Great. Thanks very much, Jenny. And thanks everybody for participating in the polls. It's really interesting. Just before we get to the panel discussion, I just wanted to acknowledge, and Cheeto, maybe you can move to the next slide. I just wanted to acknowledge who the CoLab partners were, the 7 organizations that Jenny mentioned, and also CGAP support and IPA as the technical advisor to the project. So fortunately, we have 2 of the 7 partners today that have kindly agreed to share their experience. So that's Village Enterprise and People's Pension Trust. We have Benedette Menka, as we saw on the previous slide, from Village Enterprise, and then Edwin Masareka from People's Pension Trust. So that's okay with the slide now. We can shift to the... Yeah, so just what I'd like to do is just ask each of you to introduce yourself, and then just briefly the intervention that you were testing the WE measurement tools on. So Benedict, if you could start, that would be great. Thank you. Oh, you're on mute, Benedict.
Sorry about that. My name is Benedette Menke, and I serve as a partnership officer at People's Pension Trust Ghana, where I coordinate our international partnerships. At People's Pension Trust, we aim to encourage workers in the informal sector, especially the women, to save for their old age. Our product is a personal pension scheme with features that include pensions, savings, and insurance, tailored to meet the needs of workers in this sector. It's a voluntary scheme and very flexible to accommodate irregular income streams, which is a key characteristic of workers in the informal sector. To add more value to the product, we also offer financial literacy program to empower our members. And we are currently working with financial institutions to offer credit facilities to these members also. This is the intervention we used for the activity. Hello?
Thanks, Benedict. Yeah, go ahead. Edwin, if I could just ask you to introduce the yourself and the intervention, and then we'll come back to talk a little bit more about People's Pension Trust.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Edwin Masareka. I am a Senior Learning and Evolution Manager at Village Enterprise. Village Enterprise is an NGO that implements a poverty graduation model where we target households living in extreme poverty using the Poverty Probability Index. We give financial literacy training to these households once they have been identified. We give them small grants to start businesses so that they can develop a livelihood out of this. Normally, 80% of our participants are women, and this is the program where we tested the tool for women economic empowerment.
Thank you, Edwin. Maybe we'll just jump back to the previous slide, and Benedict can just quickly go through the process of testing and just how you did it. Then we can talk more about your experience.
Oh, okay. We began with designing a measurement plan which outlines our research objectives and our sample size. We also determined our data collection strategy. The questionnaire was customized to meet our specific requirements, and we also translated it into our local language just to enable respondents who were not proficient in English to participate. Our sample size was categorized into two, where we had existing members as well as potential members. And we had a sample size of 200 participants. We also trained our enumerators to familiarize them with the survey and as well as the survey questions as well as the process. And we also used the enumerator guide for that. Once we were done with these steps, it took us a month to collect data from the sample size of 200 participants.
You can keep going, Benedict, through the slide. Thanks.
Our data was collected using Google Forms, and the results were compiled in an Excel sheet for the analysis. And the cleaning process was easy because of the help of the codebook. And overall, the process of data cleaning and analysis took us approximately 2 weeks to complete.
Okay, great.
Joanna, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Edwin, if you can just now speak about the process of data collection and cleaning and your experience with calculating the indicators as well, please.
Right, thank you. For us, this was part of our data collection. Normally, we targeted participants who are already enrolled into our program. We run the poverty graduation program, which is 1 year long between the targeting of the participants and when we graduate them. So we conduct always a baseline at the beginning of the program. And from this baseline, we selected a sample of 209 households where we are going to administer this questionnaire of the women economic empowerment. This was spread across Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. Of course, we developed a measurement plan with the guidance of the collab partners, and it took us about 2 weeks to collect data from each of these countries. The survey was 30 to 45 minutes to complete, and this was built in TarrowWorks, which is a mobile data collection tool where we were able to put in the forms, and enumerators used mobile devices to collect the data. We encouraged enumerators to synchronize their information at the end of every day, such that we can check it and see for consistency and be able to give them feedback if there are any issues that need to be rectified. So after checking the data collection every day, we would follow up with the enumerators if there are any issues such as outliers, especially to do with the incomes, if they're out of range. And we followed the code book for data cleaning that was provided by the IPA. We used Stata for both analysis and data cleaning, and the codebook that was provided by IPA and the guidance were helpful in calculating the indicators. Thank you, and that's how we managed to collect information from our participants.
Wonderful. Thank you, Edwin, and thank you, Benedict. So it sounds like it was testing process went quite well. Maybe I could now ask you to speak about any of the challenges that you experienced and learnings that you had. And again, I'll start with Benedict and then go to you, Edwin.
From the outset, we faced several challenges, and one of them was the fact that the survey was very time consuming, as it took us about 25 to 30 minutes to complete a survey per respondent. The reason was due to the length, where we had many questions to cover, and we also experienced participants showing some signs of fatigue and impatience. And what we did was to keep the process as engaging and as brief as possible. Another reason was the disruptions that we had from busy participants who would, at a point in time, pause the interview to go attend to their customers before coming back. Another challenge was the respondents being very uncomfortable sharing information about their income. Most of them were unable to recall specific financial details. For example, like information relating to their annual income. What we did was to break it down to daily or weekly income, and we were able to do the math for them. So there was a level of discomfort and reluctance when it came to questions around privacy. The respondents were wondering why we were asking intimate questions regarding to private phone calls and text messages. So they were afraid that they could not get, they could get into trouble with their partners if they found out. So what we did was to reassure them of the confidentiality of their responses. And we made them to understand that the survey was anonymous and there was no way information could be traced back to them. Secondly, we reminded them of the overall reason why we were collecting the data in the first place, which was to understand their needs and be able to find ways to serve them better. This is how we're able to mitigate these issues.
And do you think if you did it again, they would be willing to answer, respond to all the questions? And would you include all of the questions, you think?
Yes, we included all of the questions and they were able to answer to them. They were more accommodating after we explained to them the reasons and also the fact that the survey was anonymous. They were able to comply.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Benedette. Edwin, did you want to share some of the challenges you experienced, if any?
Yeah, sure. Some of them are not so different from what Benedict faced. But for us, initially, the major challenge was about where the husbands were unavailable. Some women would not participate. They refused to participate until their husbands were available to give approval. And in this case, what we did, we offered to return to the household and when the husband is available, so that we ask for the approval for women. This survey was targeting women to respond. So sometimes the husbands would ask, why is it that you're asking my wife and not me? So we'd have to explain to them the intent of this survey. We also sometimes made phone calls to the husband if they had a phone, so that we can conduct the survey immediately. Would have the wife talk to the husband, and once he provided that consent, we would go ahead and do the survey. Another challenge that we faced involved difficulty in recalling incomes for a full year. We're asking people how much they have earned in the whole year. So some of them who are earning wage on a weekly basis could not recall this, and we broke down the question to them for weekly, monthly, and until we could aggregate and estimate the income for a full year. The last one was about the discomfort, which Bennett was also talked about, where there was private questions or confidential questions that were being asked. And some women were reluctant to respond to this or uncomfortable. And once we realized this at the beginning, when we went to the households, we told them to isolate themselves. Of course, outside the house, but we would ask these questions when they are alone, not with other people, so that they don't feel uncomfortable responding when those other people are around. But also we would reassure them of confidentiality, that there's no way these will leak and be traced back to them by their husbands, so that they are able to provide authentic information And this is how we're able to mitigate some of those challenges.
I could just ask one question about when contacting the husbands for approval. Did you ever have any husbands insist that they are present for the interviews, or was it always with the women on their own?
We did not have any cases of husbands insisting that they have to be present. We had already enrolled these people in our program, and we have a training that we do for family support, so they know that they are supposed to support their women in this program. And so once they are contacted, they would offer that approval. They are already aware about the intervention.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much. So just going forward in terms of next steps, do you think that you would both use the tool going forward and integrate it into your regular monitoring? And also how often, if you are going to integrate it, how often you would plan to administer it? And then also just briefly how you would ultimately use the information that is coming from this. And maybe we'll start with Edwin this time.
Yes, we are developing an intervention that will integrate gender programming into our poverty graduation model, and we intend to use this tool to measure changes in women economic empowerment. The way tool will be used to measure changes in both baseline and endline that will be conducted 12 months apart, since our program is 1 year. But of course, for programs that are longer, we encourage individuals to administer this in periods maybe more than 1 year. If your program is longer, but ours, we will re-administer this after 1 year, even for those households that we initially tested this tool with. By September this year, we'll be going back to those same households, to re-administer this survey.
Okay.
Just Edwin, just following up on that, do you think that you would see changes in WE? I mean, these measurement tools are intended to be used once and then used again after women's financial inclusion or financial services have been used, and then measured to see if there's any changes in WE. Do you think you would see a change in WE within the 1 year period of the program? I appreciate you are also going to measure longer term, but what are you thinking in terms of when you'll see results, and what are you going to do with the information that you receive?
Yeah, we think we will see changes in women economic empowerment. Within our program, we've always had qualitative stories of people saying there's a change in their in their lives, but then we did not have these measurements, these indicators for us to be able to ascertain that. So with this tool, we hope that we will be able to measure this and see a change in our program. This will help us to, through this tool, we'll be able to quantify the levels of change reported by women in areas where we work, and this will show insights into the effectiveness of our program in empowering women and enhancing overall economic improvement.
Great, thank you so much, Edwin. So Benedict, to you now, just the same questions. Can you tell us a little bit about how you plan to use the tools? Are you going to integrate it into your regular monitoring? How often will you measure? And then how would you use the information coming from the data that you collect? Thank you.
Yeah, also we plan to use the tools in the future, but given that our product is a pension product, and it is a long-term initiative, and conducting the survey annually may not really give us significant results and could potentially be a waste of resources for us. We are considering a more strategic approach. We believe that conducting the survey every 2 to 3 years would be more effective for us, allowing us to track meaningful changes and trends in women economic empowerment over time.
Okay, thank you so much. We're just about out of time. Is there anything either of you would like to add that you want to mention to the community in terms of your experience in testing these?
Yes, I would like to emphasize the importance of working with a data analyst when using the measurement tools. In my case, initially, I tried to perform the calculations manually with the help of the guide provided, but my results were not aligned with the IPS calculations. So I had to seek help from a data analyst who used Excel with the help of the guide also to perform the calculation. And his results were just as the same as those calculated by the IPS.
So is it now clear how to do it? Will that would be in-house next time?
Yeah.
That's great. Edwin, any final comments before we shift to questions?
Yeah, sure. From my end, it is important to have constant communication with the team, especially when you're doing the data collection, because we realize that there would be there are certain things that were not clear in the field, and with that constant communication, we are able to be in touch with the enumerators and guiding them on how to collect this information. With that, you minimize the errors that are made in the field. But also using an online platform for data collection, we are able to code the data and minimize the errors so that we limit the responses in cases where we do not need unnecessary responses, and also doing routine data cleaning. For example, if they have reported incomes that these households have earned, would constantly look through and know if this is within the range that we expect, and then get back to the numerator so that we are able to get the correct information. Thank you.
And you know what to expect because it's the graduation program, I assume.
Yeah, but then what I'm talking about is when you analyze the information, you look at the ranges and the outliers. If you see something that is in an anomaly, then we are able to call back to the field if this is a true value.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I think we're right on time now to move to the audience participants' questions. Jenny, should I just be going through, starting?
Yeah, if you want to take a look, we've
Sure.
the questions in the document for you.
Just, oh, you have. Okay.
Yeah, I
okay.
highlighted a few that I think we could start with.
In the document.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have to refresh it. Okay. Oh, it's asking me to sign in. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to, can I go through the chat then? Some of the ones
Sure.
that you
Or I
wanted.
can call one out for you.
I'm just looking at the Jagadish about disaggregating the women by age and other intersectional things like marriage and et cetera. And one thing that is probably useful to note is that we were testing the tools, not so much measuring and looking at the actual results of women's economic empowerment, because ultimately what we're looking for is change over time as a result of using using financial services. So we didn't actually get to a point where we were collecting data and disaggregating it, et cetera. But of course, that would be specific to the organization as you're measuring. So I hope that that's clear. Jenny, do you have another one you want that we could get maybe?
Yeah, there was a question for Nancy from Nancy Thomas for Edwin. And she asked, she'd be interested to know how important the collab partners thought it was to have highly trained enumerators conduct the surveys due to the sensitivities you described. And I know you talked a little bit about this, but the question is, did you use your own staff to conduct the surveys? Were they independent or third party? And a related question was, were all the interviewers women? And I know this came up in our conversations with everyone in the collab, you know, whether this was important, intentional, what happened when we had different, you know, enumerators in different situations. So Edwin, if you could just answer that question, and then I'd love to hear from Benedetta as well about were the enumerators women?
Thank you. From our end, we initially thought we'd have all the enumerators as women, but then we decided to include one male for us to be able to know if there are potential issues if the man is administering the questionnaire to the women. Fortunately, we do not have any issues, and this person was able to administer the question well. We also used our we have a pool of part-time staff who are enumerators that are constantly on the call for them to collect data. So these are the people we used, and before going into the field, we were able to train them on how to use this tool and refresh them on other ethics of research, so that we have authentic information from the field. I hope I answered the question.
Thanks, Edwin. Benedict, did you want to add to that in terms of the enumerators?
Yeah, in my own case, our enumerators are our sales officers. They are both made of male and female, and they didn't face any issues with carrying out the survey. We trained them using the enumerator guide, the enumerator training guide, give them guidance on the do's and don'ts of data collection process. And this is something they do quite often, so it wasn't that difficult for them to understand the process.
Great, thank you. I hope that answers the question. Another one is from Mary McFay about the baseline or end line. Was there a baseline and then an end line, or was the survey an end line? And the question formulating to ask women whether these indicators have improved. And I don't know, Mary, if it, at this point, as I mentioned, we were just testing the indicators, so we weren't actually measuring or changes in we. By definition, we couldn't do that since we only measured them once. So I don't know if Benedict or Edwin, you want to respond to that, or if we can move on.
But just to add that is the intention, that there would be 2 points in time at least that didn't come across clearly.
Yeah, we're looking at trying to develop evidence for increased women's economic empowerment as a result of using financial services. So once access and usage increase, does that then lead to greater empowerment? Are women more empowered? So you have to do it in at least 2 points in time, and ideally more often than that as well, just to be able to either adjust the intervention you're doing or to prove that increased women's financial inclusion is having a positive effect on women's economic empowerment.
And Joe, I can add a related question to this end-line baseline conversation. So the question was from Monica Oyer, and how would the participating organizations include the survey or indicators and other assessments conducted by their organization, such as other baseline surveys, annual reviews, so that it's seamlessly integrated into the existing processes? And I think Edwin already touched on that this was included in their baseline for the program. And then Benedict mentioned it was separate. But I don't know if either of you have something more to add about, you know, how you'll integrate it into your existing processes.
Yeah, for us, this initial one was part of our baseline. But of course, we think we are going to prioritize some indicators based on the results, although this initial one will measure everything that was in the tool. But we are looking at prioritizing some of the indicators to add fully into our baseline and end line going forward.
Did you have anything, Benedict, for that? Benedict?
Just like Edwin said, as it's also a baseline for us. It's just a starting point. And we are going to select some of the indicators that we think are okay for us to proceed with. Then we add them to our existing indicators.
There's a message here from Nancy Thomas. The one thing we've really struggled with when trying to monitor change in WE over time is the high levels of attrition. Do the collab partners foresee this being a problem for them as well, especially if we know that we need more time between surveys to really see if there has been any change? Either of you have a response?
Yeah, of course, attrition is part of this, but we over time have seen less than 5% of our participants drop out. And so we still believe that we will have a sufficient sample for us to do the analysis once we do the baseline and end line. Our attrition is not high in our poverty graduation program. We have less than 5% of our participants dropping out between the 1 year. Probably this may be a problem for longer programs.
Benedict?
But what we did was to select from our existing data sets to carry out the survey. We select participants from our existing data sets, and we also had prospects that we are trying to bring on board. Given that it's a retirement product, it is likely impossible for participants to fall out of the program. So we will still have this same group of participants for us to be able to carry out the survey with them. Though it may not be exactly the same people, but it will still be the same target population.
So it may be that attrition is a problem with other types of interventions. I also think attribution is, it's hard to always be, given the time frame for measuring this is longer, it is hard to isolate that it's specifically the increase in use of financial services, but these are all issues that we've considered during the process. There's a question here from Jennifer. Mindful of the challenges conducting the surveys, both from a time and data accuracy sensitivity standpoint, were there certain indicators the collab partners either adjusted or would deprioritize for future WE measurements? Or were there any indicators that needed to change or that you wouldn't carry on measuring in future?
Yeah, from our end, there are some indicators that we may not follow up measuring in future. Basically, one of the reasons is that some of these are already doing well in the areas where we are working, and we will not see a need for us to continue measuring them because there would not be any significant improvement that we are trying to achieve. One of them is the percentage of women who believe work should be free to choose. Percentage of women who believe women should be free to choose employment. In the areas where we worked, I think about over 90% of women believe that they should be free to choose employment. So we think we may not continue measuring such indicators that are already scoring high.
And in my own case, women who are involved in economic activity, the target population we are working with are women who are already involved in economic activity. So that indicator will have to pull it out. And then a greater proportion of them are also have control over their finances. So we'll have to be pulling that out also.
Okay, great. not sure if Mary has a question here about a plan for aggregating across organizations to reflect what's going on in the industry. And certainly the intention is to develop the evidence base that increased WFI leads to increased WE. I think what we're looking for is as the more and more organizations are using these specific measurement tools and are willing to share, there is plans ideally for sharing, collecting that information, not in a very formal way, but we're just about to shift to speaking with Antonique Koning, who's on our advisory group, and she may have some more things to say about that in terms of CGAP's role and what we plan to do going forward. So maybe, I don't know if now is a good time to go. Jenny, is there any other questions we should cover before going to Antonique?
We're trying to answer some in the chat, so
Yeah.
I think we can move forward, and we'll try to respond to people if we can't in the chat offline. So thank you.
Okay. Having just said that, I'm trying to keep up with them as they come in, and there is one about indicators measuring changes in social norms. So I'm going to also suggest that we discuss that with Antonique, because CGAP is doing a lot of work on gender norms. Okay, so yeah, sorry if we didn't have a chance to get to everybody's questions, but thank you so much for all the excellent questions. Feel free to keep putting them in the chat. We'll be, as you know, the meeting's been recorded, but we'll also keep track of the questions in the chat. But I'd like to now move to our advisory board member, Antonique Koning, who has kindly agreed to share her experience as a member of the advisory group. I think there were 6 advisory group members, and Antonique was one of them. So Antonique, as part of the advisory group, can you just comment on the process that we went through to develop the tools? And then also separately, just what your views on what you think about these tools that we've ended up with and that have been now very, very well tested by the CoLab partners. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Joanna, for these questions. And thank you for all the questions in the chat. I mean, I'm so excited that, first of all, we have such a great group of people that are attending, but also the very practical, specific questions that you've all come up with. This is great. But let me answer your questions, Joanna. First of all, I think this was a very consultative and collaborative process. Many people have contributed, have given their opinions and views on the indicators in the process, not just the advisory group, I would say. So I really want to highlight that. And of course, the whole process, as Jenny said at the beginning, was anchored in this theory of change that already resulted from a lot of consultation with the community at large and drawing on materials and frameworks that many of you have put together over time. So I think the process, I would say, was, again, very collaborative, consultative, and I therefore feel quite comfortable with where we've ended up. With regard to the tools, I think I'm grateful for the CoLab partners that were willing to test these indicators. And I think one of the questions was, have you changed anything? We have made changes, and thanks to IPA and their support, I think we're very much able to respond to some of the findings from the different experiences of the CoLab partners. And I think the most important of these tools are that they're very practical, and we very much focused on this practical application and feasibility, even though, as you heard from Bernadette and Edwin, there are still quite some challenges to do this, and some of you reflected challenges in the chat as well. So I would say the tools as they're being proposed, I think are a good starting point. As Joanna highlighted, this is what we did here was really to create a first data point for these organizations that participated, and obviously you would have to do that again in order to assess whether these indicators are giving you that valuable insight into women's economic empowerment that we want to see. I do want to recognize the valuable support that we got from our advisory group members, and Joanna, of course, being one of them, but then also Carina Nielsen from CGAP, Myra Buvenik, who was also one of the co-authors of the original background paper that has been shared from the Center for Global Development and Data to X. We also had great support from Alethea Donaldson from the Gender Innovation Lab at the World Bank, has been in the weeds of some of these measurement frameworks, and so really, really great feedback from her. Also, Gama Hishiguzuren from the New Lines Institute provided input, and then Lillian Tan from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who also is very interested to learn from this process for their own partners, and then Tolu Babajide from the Financial Sector Deepening Network, where also across the network there's an important interest for measuring women's economic empowerment. And also that network is actually the network that CGAP is working with on social norms and trying to better understand diagnosing social norms. And those things connect. I mean, Joanna, to your earlier question, or a question that was posed in the chat, I think a lot of the empowerment and the agency issues that we're trying to look at in a more common holistic indicator framework that has been developed will allow us also to see the changes that women experience. Now, looking then at what gender norms are changing over time, that of course requires other things that you should be looking at, not just interviewing women, but also looking at the behavior change by other actors in the market. Most importantly, of course, the financial service providers, but also any other supporting function and policy or regulation that can enable women to be much more part of an inclusive and responsible financial system. Back to you, Joanne.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Antonique. Just one last question. How do you see these tools adding value to the financial inclusion sector? I mentioned the need for more evidence that increased women's financial inclusion leads to women's economic empowerment, but just again, as a member of the advisory group, your thoughts on that and the future in terms of what we plan to do next.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. This is one of the reasons why CGAP is supporting this initiative so strongly. We have to, as an industry, be much more focused on the outcomes of the use of financial services by people in the industry. And so the pure lack of data that we today have is really hindering us, I think, to say meaningful things about the contribution of financial inclusion to women's economic empowerment. We have assumptions, we have hypotheses, but the data is just not sufficient. So ideally, with more people, more organizations measuring these indicators in a more kind of consistent, coherent way, we would allow us really to have more of a sense of what kind of interventions work for whom and where and why. And this common framework and menu of indicators, which Edwin also spoke to, not all of the indicators might be relevant for everyone in every context, but this kind of consistent menu of options, I think, will be really helpful to that extent. And that leads me to the future. Indeed, I would really call on everyone on this webinar, but also beyond that in our inclusive finance space, to be more deliberate and mindful about trying to measure beyond access and usage, to see specifically in the case of women whether we're actually contributing. Again, attribution will remain difficult, but at least contributing to that change that we all like to see. And hopefully, if there are a good enough number of organizations that are eager and willing to do that, we can actually pull that information together and feed it into other efforts that are going on, including the Finance 2.0 initiative that CGAP is leading, to get the whole industry to be more focused on outcomes and impact. Back to you.
Fantastic. And I couldn't agree more. I think if we're going to continue to invest in increasing women's financial inclusion, we do need to know that it's doing some good and improving quality of life of women. So thank you so much, Antonique. Thank you so much, Benedict and Edwin, and Jenny, of course. And I'm going to hand to the participants and all the fabulous questions in the chat. And I'll now hand it back to Jenny to close.
Yeah, thank you, Antonique. Thank you, Joanna. Just a final thanks to everyone, all the collab participants, to IPA, Elliot Collins, Isabella Contreras are on the call with us, but also thank to Tom Vijaluka, who worked with us throughout this past year, and to CGAP, of course, for all their support. As you exit the webinar today, you'll have a quick poll pop up. Please take a moment, give us some feedback on this session, and we would appreciate that. And otherwise, yeah, keep the questions coming. I'll put my contact information in here. And thank you all for participating.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.